Welcome, everybody. Again, I am Shannon Yee. I'm an associate professor in mechanical engineering, and I have the pleasure today of having Dr. Stephen Hammer with me. He's the inaugural CEO of the New York Climate Exchange, a first-of-a-kind collaborative model for how we can solve climate solutions. Thank you all for attending today. And thank you, Steve, for making the trip down to Georgia Tech. So far, it's been a really wonderful partnership amongst the universities, and based upon a very simple hypothesis that collaboration works. So I kind of want to kick it off with there and hear from you a little bit about, tell us about the New York Climate Exchange. What's the status? What's the mission? What's the vision? All of that.
Great. Well, first off, thank you very much. Really appreciate Georgia Tech, the invitation to come down. I'm on what I guess we would characterize as a listening tour. I was at our partner, Oxford University, last week, Atlanta, visiting Georgia Tech this week, and on to Duke University next week. These are really important conversations to meet the partners, to hear, why did you join this coalition? This is in this room, we have pictures of Governor's Island. We have pictures of what the exchange may look like in several years. And, it's a rather audacious idea that the city of New York put forward several years ago as part of its strategy for developing Governor's Island to more modern uses. For several hundred years, it was a military base. That closed in 2002, and the city took over control. And there were some very early ideas of, again, this is an island in the middle of the harbor. It's a stone's throw from the Statue of Liberty. You can see Wall Street. You can see Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Bridge. Some of the early ideas were, let's put a casino on the island. Fortunately, that didn't go anywhere. But people began to galvanize around the idea of climate as a theme that would really hold a lot of the activities together on the island. And so the Trust for Governor's Island, which is the city agency that owns the island or manages the island, put out this request for proposals to universities asking for ideas on what a Center for Climate Solutions might look like. And ultimately, it was a coalition headed by Stony Brook University, the State University of New York at Stony Brook, involving partners like Georgia Tech. Again, a total of 12 universities total, 3 major international corporations, and over 30 community-level organizations that range from labor unions to environmental justice groups to workforce development groups to cultural institutions. All of them came together because they believed in this vision that it was important to help New Yorkers understand what the climate implications might hold for the city going forward, but also if there were opportunities, what those opportunities might look like. And so that's essentially what we're trying to build at the Exchange. It's a place where you'll have educational programming, you will have research underway of varying kinds, you will have conversations among key stakeholders trying to solve really challenging problems, and you will have some kind of incubation of the climate technologies that we're going to be needing in the future, all together in a single place. And a creature like that really doesn't exist anywhere in the world. I've been working on climate issues for over 30 years and was working internationally for the last 10. And there's no combination like that I'm really aware of at the scale that we're talking about here.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it seems like a very audacious vision to kind of realize. And I think for Georgia Tech, we're very honored to be one of the permanent core partners. And with that, the reason for that is the alignment with our mission. And so, Georgia Tech's mission is to develop leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. And I just kind of wanted to hear your reflection on that. How is that alignment, and how do you see Georgia Tech helping with the Exchange's mission? Well,
Georgia Tech is an absolutely essential partner. One of the things that you learn when you come here and I really appreciate all the folks I've been talking to, the research faculty, some students, really learning about what it is that happens on campus and how the climate conversation it can be an engineering question, it can be an economics question, it can cover a lot of different disciplines. And again, I think that's what the beauty is of the Exchange, particularly when you're engaging multiple partner institutions like this. There's a certain set of ideas that I regularly communicate when I talk about the exchange, and that when you have 12 universities involved, it's actually, and you begin to break it down, it's 9 engineering schools or 8 schools of public health or 8 law schools. And when you think of it that way, there's virtually no question related to climate change, impacts or opportunities that our group of partners, Georgia Tech principally among them, can't help in terms of identifying what the key issues are that we have to navigate. What are some methods we might use to identify possible options in terms of solutions? One of you mentioned this idea of, again, just go back to the name. It's an exchange. It's intended to bring different perspectives together, different voices together. Again, if you go back to the partners, academia, private sector, community level organizations, you're going to end up with a very different conversation than if it was only one of those communities. And so bringing together the experts, bringing together the people who are dealing with the realities of climate impacts in New York City every day, or are looking for that job opportunity that may be the career opportunity that will give them a livelihood going forward for many decades, or they're hoping that their children are going to become more literate about climate change. We want to help fill that niche in terms of that the information, in terms of training, in terms of ideas, so that we can really help expand the awareness of climate change in New York, but also, again, what solutions it might take to address the realities we're facing in the coming decades.
Fantastic. And I love how we emphasize the word, the exchange, right? For today's fireside chat, we're calling it the tale of 2 exchanges, right? We have the New York Climate Exchange, and in support of that, Georgia Tech is creating the exchange at Georgia Tech, which can help with that hub and spoke model. So I also understand this is your first visit to Georgia Tech, your first time seeing the campus. So I wanted to kind of hear some of your reflections. What do you think? What's your first impression?
Well, I've been very fortunate with the weather. Beautiful. Beautiful. Is this a spring day or a winter day? I'm not sure, but I'll take it. And,
Exactly.
Look, the thing that's important to me here is the enthusiasm that I'm seeing and hearing about the exchange. To me, that's tremendously reassuring. And, when you have, and again, I've been working in this space for many years, and working on climate change can sometimes be a pretty distressing field to be focused on. The progress is slow. The needs are tremendous at a local level or at a global level. We know what many of the solutions are, but it's hard to figure out how to pay for them. And sometimes the institutions that we're working with are also, they operate in a way, or they're structured in a way that it's hard for them to dramatically change the way they do things. And so you kind of get used to a certain level of pace of progress. And what I'm extraordinarily excited about, and I'm hearing it here in all of the meetings that I'm having on campus, optimism and enthusiasm that the way we're thinking about this, again, bringing different communities together, bringing different voices to the conversation, is going to break through and help us achieve that progress so that we can move faster and we can move further. So the first takeaway is great enthusiasm, and I'm extraordinarily appreciative of that, because when you're building a partnership, you want partners who are all in, and that's the sense I'm taking away today.
Excellent. I'm really happy about that. It's really good. And I like how this partnership, just like, again, the word exchange emphasizes, is a two-way street, right? We have a lot of activities up in New York. We also have a lot of activities down here in Atlanta, in Georgia, in the Southeast. I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about how you see this exchange playing out between New York and Atlanta and the Southeast.
Well, so people get very hung up on the fact that New York is in the name. And that often, to many people, they think, oh, so you're only worried about what's going on in New York. And I think that there is a lot that New York can offer the world. There's been a lot of thought leadership, a lot of policy leadership. There's money coming out of Wall Street that can provide, resources for climate action in a lot of different places, including in Georgia. But there's a lot that New York can learn from elsewhere. Yeah. And so part of the partnership model, and that's why we're not just a series of New York institutions only, but we do have universities from other parts of the United States. We do have an international partner in the UK. And I think the recognition is that, again, that access to information or ideas from another part of the country that may be having challenges that are slightly different, but can nonetheless inform the solutions we may need or want to talk about in New York, that's an important set of the equation. When you have as many partners as we do, however, and again, I don't dismiss this as an easy situation that we're going to be navigating. Again, universities that are geographically distributed and 8 hours apart in terms of time zones. Community organizations that are very focused on the realities of the community they're serving. And that means that their ability to engage on some of the things that we may want to bring them in on may be difficult. So we're going to have to figure out the operating model, the engagement model that really accommodates that, understands that. But in doing so, I think it really celebrates the differences that, that distance or those time zones may mean. The virtue of the hub model that you're building here is that we know where to send information. It's a single point of contact with the university. It's a way of ensuring that the responsibility isn't only on our shoulders, but that we have partners on campus who are ready to figure out who are the people who should be hearing about this issue or that opportunity. And in that regard, it's something that I'm already talking about to other partners, saying you may wish to consider doing something like this, because again, I think it's going to facilitate communication. I think it's going to expand the level of engagement across the institution. And given that, again, we really want to make sure that we're approaching things differently, and that it is engineers, but it's also economists. It is policy experts. It is people who are coming at this from a very different perspective. And you can help me make sure that we're reaching all of those people.
Yes, I love that. And that's a great transition. So behind us here, we actually have a rendering, right? And again, it's not just engineers, but we have designers, architects, public policy, a lot of representation with all of the different partners. And I was wondering if you could help us kind of appreciate that vision. What is the physical space going to look like for this multi-university campus?
Well, first off, please come to New York. Come visit the island. Governor's Island, it's a 5-minute ferry ride from the tip of Lower Manhattan. Right now, it's one of the ferries that's been in use for a long period of time, but in the coming years, it'll be switching over to a hybrid electric ferry. So, we'll have more environmentally sound ways of getting to the island. And that's important, again, because we're really trying to communicate that what you want to do, there's this great line that Amory Lovins, became well known for, that what we really want is hot showers and cold beer. And, how you achieve that, let's have a conversation about. It doesn't always need to be from a single source of electricity or a single way to heat that water. We're trying to help people get from the tip of Lower Manhattan onto Governor's Island. It can be a diesel-powered ferry. It can be an electric ferry. Let's show people what the opportunities are, how technologies can change over time and do things in a more, less carbon-intensive manner. When you get on the island, you're coming onto an island that was a military base. There are historic forts on the island that you can go visit. Those are managed by the National Park System. There's big open spaces that, again, were part of the old military complex there. And then you get to Liggett Hall, which is this very tall, grand brick structure with the cupola on top. And it looks like a lot of college campuses in the Northeast, quite frankly. And we're going to be taking over a portion of that structure, turning it into offices, dormitory. There's going to be residential space on the island for students, for faculty, for researchers. so that they can really come spend an intensive amount of time on the island. There is adjacent to that property, adjacent to Liggett Hall, there's the old base theater. Movies, theatrical productions can hold up to 600 or 700 people. So we'll be able to accommodate, a very large auditorium space. Immediately adjacent to that is a privately, a company has received approval from the Trust for Governors Island to build a private tech incubator on the island. So that'll be our immediate neighbor. And then you get to the newer space. Right now, we're finalizing the design. It's several 100,000 square feet. Some in the historic buildings that are having to be retrofitted, a lot of asbestos, we need to upgrade all the mechanicals in those buildings to newer, more sustainable technology. We've benefited from ideas and advice from experts here at Georgia Tech and some of our other partner institutions, so we're very appreciative of that as well. But then you get into the new buildings, and that's where it's going to be the conference spaces. That's where it's going to be laboratory space of different kinds. That's where we think there will be opportunities to really expose the public to what climate tech looks like, how you do research on climate change in a more transparent manner. And so there are going to be walkways through the campus that are really giving you the opportunity to go peer in and look at the mechanical engineering design work that's going on with a certain type of technology. There will be landscaping that will, again, much like what we have here on campus at Georgia Tech, which is saying that we want to pay attention to the type of plantings. We want to use the land in a certain way to embrace the idea of minimizing runoff. We want to create shaded spaces so that we don't need mechanical cooling on a hot day. And so all of those design elements are being factored in. And over time, and I'm not sure when this will actually change, but the current location where you get off the ferry on Governor's Island will be shifting to the pier that is immediately at the base of what will be the Climate Exchange campus. Right now, 1 million people a year come to the island. They want to come play on the ball fields. You can go glamping during the summer. That seems to be a very popular thing. There is a high-end spa that has opened up on the island. There are bars on the island, during the warm weather months. So people enjoy coming to the island. And now we're going to be adding this new feature, educational opportunities. Some of it's going to be very active programming. Some of it's going to be, again, this is a building that has solar panels on it. This is a building that is employing different kinds of water-saving technologies. This is a building that is heating itself in different ways. You'll have the opportunity to learn about that, touch it, really begin to understand and engage with what climate change means in practice in terms of engineering, in terms of design, and in terms of conversations that you can have with people.
I love it. I absolutely love it. That's a beautiful picture. And I think we're very fortunate at Georgia Tech. We have something, I think, that resembles what the architecture of the building is going to look like. My understanding is the new builds will be some of the first mass timber constructions in New York City, right? And there is aspirations for this to be the first living building in the state of New York and the largest living building in the world. And I say Georgia Tech is fortunate because we took on the Living Building Challenge, and just behind us here, we have the Candida Building for innovative and sustainable design. And we've learned a lot in having to design and engineer that building, right? And I think a lot of the lessons learned there are going to be, I guess, ported over to the construction for the New York Climate Exchange. And so today you got, or I should say yesterday, you got a tour of the building and got to experience the Candida Building. What do you think?
Well, first off, again, we appreciate your going first. It was a great opportunity. I mean, the design team has come down and visited campus, toured the building, and kind of uniformly left impressed that, this is an inviting space. Again, when you walk through, and I really appreciate the tour that we received, kind of walks through every element of it in terms of the design features that you might otherwise miss. But it's the details that matter. It's the details that determine whether you need more lighting or less lighting, mechanical lighting. It's the details that determine, whether you, even the way it's designed, it was fairly well occupied, but it was still quiet in the meeting rooms. Those are things that, again, you can have glass-walled meeting rooms, you can have classrooms adjacent to one another, and have a very inviting space that is very multifunctional, but is doing it all in a way that's consuming less power, it's consuming less thermal energy. And I was quite struck by, the information about how much more power the building generates than it actually consumes.
Yep.
And again, when you can show people that you can do this and sacrifice nothing, and that is an idea that can stay with people for a long, long time. So in that way, we're hoping that the building inspires the public. We're hoping that the building informs the public about where we are today, that you don't have to do things the way we did 20, 30, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The change is possible, that you can get building codes to accommodate this. You can get building permits to do things in a different way. And hopefully more and more people will learn from that and follow that way.
Yeah, I think with the Candida building, we've learned how it can be a regenerative building, right? And give back to the world more than it consumes, generating more electricity than it consumes, producing its own water, treating its own waste. It really is a unique space that can inspire people. So going back to the picture, we talked about the island and the foreground there. In the back, we have New York City, right? And I'm not sure exactly which road it is, but I know one of those roads is Wall Street, and we lead down towards the New York Stock Exchange. And I know the name is not a coincidence, it was intentional. How do you see the New York ecosystem, right? The community really embracing this concept of the New York Climate Exchange?
Many people have had their first exposure to, the news story about the exchange or, the competition. I think there was a real emphasis on, and this is going to deliver the greatest value to neighborhoods, to communities in and around New York City. I tend to think in terms of communities, and, so it may be a community in Brooklyn or Queens or the South Bronx. But there are other communities in New York, and there's the diplomatic community. We have the United Nations headquarters just kind of straight up the East River. You do have the Wall Street community. You have the arts and culture community. You have the design community. It's a media hub globally. When you think about the assets that the exchange partners bring to the table, again, I talked about the engineering expertise, the business expertise, the public health expertise, the oceanography expertise. That's very clear in terms of a certain type of asset. But again, proximity to a financial capital, that's a completely different conversation, different people we're going to be engaging, an absolutely essential part of the puzzle. Because again, even if we know what we need to do, where we're finding the money has been proving to be one of the more challenging issues facing the climate community for many years. And so being able to engage that community, again, talk to Madison Avenue in some meaningful way to say, climate change, how can you help us communicate differently? How can you help us change the way we think about consumption patterns? I don't think it's necessarily contradictory that you can have people who are good at helping to sell things change what they're trying to sell. So that we're selling things that are less carbon intensive, that it is a different kind of lifestyle, that maybe, again, may not involve getting in a car every day, but it may involve walking or bicycling. We need people who are good at messaging to help us craft some of the solutions that are really going to break through and bring people in so that they're going to say, yes, I'm willing to make a change, or I'm willing to do things differently. Why? Because it turns out I'm not going to sacrifice anything at all. Sometimes we just need help communicating that message.
Great. Yep. Now, I have kind of a silly question for you. I have this dream, or I should say more of a desire, right?
Mhm.
I want to be able to go from Georgia Tech's Atlanta campus to the island in under 3 hours, but do it in a way that's carbon neutral. How could we accomplish that? I know you talked about electric ferries, which is that last 5 minutes of the journey, but how could I do the longer leg?
Okay, well, I'm going to let you worry about getting to New York City. But once you land, I'm going to assume you're going to be on a train.
Okay.
And then I'm going to assume you're going to take the subway, or depends on if you have a bag or not. It's a lovely walk, or I can show you where the bikes are, the city bikes are that you'll be able to rent. Come right down, land at the southern tip of Manhattan at the Battery, and then hop on that ferry boat to come across. And then it'll be a very short walk to get to the campus. So assuming you can get to the train here in Atlanta, or if that's your preferred route, or if it's going to be an electric vehicle that'll take you north, there are lots of ways that we can help you get to the island in a very low carbon manner.
Very good. Yeah, taking a train from here to New York in less than 3 hours is going to be hard.
Yeah,
but we may be able to have some engineering innovation when it
Okay.
comes to electric aviation.
All right.
But I'd love to switch over and talk a little bit about programming, if we could, because I think that's really the essence of why this is all coming together. What is it that we're actually going to do, both on our campuses, for example, here in Atlanta, as well as there in New York? And I know with some of your 2024 focus areas, we're kind of looking at climate literacy. Right? So how can the exchange be leveraged to really enhance climate literacy across universities?
Well, there's literacy on many levels. So again, part of the request that the city of New York put in front of us was to work with school children and school teachers in New York City. So that will involve certain types of curricula that will be engaging, with the teachers union, engaging with schools to get them on board to, teaching either a classroom curricula or using some of the hands-on learning opportunities that if they come visit the island. And, we will have programming, the Trust for Governors Island will have programming that will be, actual come to the island and enjoy your day, but learn, about different climate-related topics. That's one way. Literacy for adult New Yorkers may mean understanding, again, what it means to the reality of buying an electric vehicle, or the reality of a certain type of heat pump that they may need to replace the old boiler in their house, and now they need to look at a new alternative, and we can help them understand that. That can be done on the island. That can be done working in hand with community organizations around New York City. Literacy for college students. One of the things that we're planning on doing, and I believe the announcement just went out in the last few days, we're recruiting college interns to come to New York for the summer to work with our community partners on climate-related issues. We're trying to bring interns from across our partner network to come to New York for the summer. We will expand that considerably over time. We may expand that it's not just in New York where you can come work on climate issues, but you can work on climate issues in other locales as well. That's a few years into the future. Literacy for businesses. Is it a workforce development topic where they need to learn how to do things differently? Is it a literacy? They just need to understand that these are issues that their businesses may face going forward. There's a lot of conversations we've begun to have with universities about the online curricula they already have in hand, the programming they're already doing, targeting executive education. So we're trying to bring those communities, those teams together from across our partner institutions, just to simply inventory what we already have access to. And then figure out, how do we make that more widely available? How do we fill in the gaps if there are clear gaps in terms of topics? If you're talking about literacy for adults on other matters, I mentioned the issue of, I need to replace the air conditioning unit in my apartment or the heating system in my home. And it's important to help people understand what their options may be. One of the things that we're seeing in different parts of the world right now, directly related to climate change, is changes in insurance markets. Yeah. And, as I've had many conversations in the last several months about this issue, it's both those who are selling the policies and those who are buying the policies that really need to understand what we're talking about in terms of, will a policy pay off if there is a flood? Will a policy pay off if there is a big storm and there's a power outage and you lose all the food that you've stored in the refrigerator? Those who are selling those policies need to be able to do that in a different way that really helps people understand New York is changing or another city is changing, and they need to begin to think through what the implications could be. It's not just fire or theft that you would need to worry about going forward. It may be other natural disasters that you're now having to increasingly pay attention to. That's a literacy conversation for those on both sides of that conversation. And how we do that, one of the things that I'm particularly excited by, and it's interesting how when I've been out talking to policymakers, when I've been out talking to practitioners, and again, they look at the asset base that we can draw on. And they think it's fantastic that we have access to world-class engineers, and it's fantastic that we have access to public health experts. One thing that I'm really struck by is when they catch what I'm saying about, we have access to communications experts as well. And if you think back to one thing that the science community, the climate scientists who have been working, in different international processes for many years now, they've been concerned, if not outright complaining, about the fact that we are putting the evidence on the table and it is not being picked up. It is not being acted upon by our policymakers. It is not being acted upon by the markets. And some of the partner institutions have actually begun to establish programs specifically for scientists on how to, change the way they're presenting information, to improve their communication skills so that hopefully they can get that message to sink in a bit more. I also think that we're going to be able to, help people who are trying to advocate for what their needs are in their communities. I hope that we will be doing programming that can work with community organizations that is trying to argue that they lack resources that are going to other parts of the city, but their neighborhood is being left behind. They still don't have trees in their neighborhood. They still suffer from flooding on a regular basis, and they're not getting the policy attention, the policymaker attention, the resources that they need to help address those challenges. And so by working with them, by creating opportunities for them to really, again, experience how to craft the message in a way that really will break through, that's something that I think we can also offer that service, that benefit to not just New Yorkers, but to communities around the United States.
Great. Yep. And I want to kind of latch onto that for a second. During the proposal phase of this, we really prioritize one pillar being on environmental justice or social justice, right? And to kind of live that, we have an environmental justice partner. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that pillar and how you see that playing out in our values.
Yeah, we have several organizations who focus specifically on environmental justice issues that are really, I think going to be very important in terms of ensuring that when we are thinking through the solutions, when we are talking about the policy reforms, when we're talking about the financing that needs to flow at scale, that it is aiming at communities, at neighborhoods, at challenges that have been largely ignored or have been sidelined in some way. A lot of what the environmental justice community, again, my sense, and I've dealt with this in different geographies, and the climate justice world is slightly different than some of the environmental justice concerns, which is often very pollution focused. In climate conversations, environmental justice often links to those who are suffering most from the impacts of climate change they did not contribute in any meaningful way to the problem of high levels of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And so, as we think through these issues, I think we're going to try and be very cognizant that we are including communities in the conversations in every way possible. And that means we're going to have to think hard about our engagement model. I was really struck when I went to visit one of our partners recently and saw the workforce development efforts that they're doing and how the community that they're engaging with, the people in the neighborhood who they're trying to help get new jobs, have a certain set of skills that may be a complete mismatch for some of the highly skilled opportunities that may emerge in New York as it tries to green up its economy. So making sure that we're trying to, again, be cognizant of the realities in a particular community or a particular problem that we're trying to solve. That means including people in the solution, including people in the articulation of what the challenge is. Another quick story, just to divert you. I was invited onto the advisory committee for a public agency, and it had its first meeting of this advisory committee a few weeks ago. And part of the conversation, it's a lot of people who work in and around city government. It's people who have extraordinary breadth and depth of knowledge about how to pay for some of the changes that are needed. I was really quite impressed with kind of who was there. They had several community representatives who were also part of that advisory group. And that's often done in many public fora. But in this case, I think it really illuminated why it's so easy if you're not engaging the right people in the conversation, you may be focusing on the completely incorrect problem. Yeah. So the conversation was very focused on energy system changes to improve building efficiency, to test out new heat pumps, to talk about how they were going to re-landscape some of the properties in a way that would lessen flooding problems in that area or in the neighborhood in general. And when it came time, and we went around the room and everybody kind of weighed in, and some of the community representatives basically said, well, this is really interesting, but it's not the problem that is that bothers me most on a daily basis. And so they completely, said, look, it's fantastic that we're having this opportunity. I'm not sure you're asking the right question. And how we design the process in a way so that we are ensuring we are asking the right question and that is the problem that the community would agree is something that they would prioritize if we were to take action, that is absolutely critically important.
Great, yeah, and kind of building upon this community aspect, a lot of people at Georgia Tech, in Atlanta, in the Southeast, have ties to New York City, family ties, or they grew up in the city and then came out down to Georgia Tech to go to school or something along those lines. And, creating this sense of place and belonging is something that universities do really well.
Absolutely.
Right? How do you see the New York Climate Exchange really helping to create this sense of place or belonging for students, researchers, faculty who come and visit the island?
Well, and it's going to be different ways that it'll appeal to different populations. So for people in the community who are looking for a pleasant day out on Governor's Island, again, 1 million people visited Governor's Island last year. They wanted to go enjoy the open space. They wanted to take their kids to the park. It could be either an active or a very passive approach that we employ to try and engage them and create a very inviting campus environment that we want them to come spend time in. We want to make it something where they can see this interesting work that's going on, behind that glass wall where the scientists or the engineers are doing the work related to climate change, climate technology. And so it's a fantastic opportunity to even expose kids at an early age or families at an early age that, look, cool tech, let's go learn more about that.
Right.
That's a great way to create place that people want to spend time in. For researchers, again, we're trying to, and this is something that the exchange, I think, will focus on very heavily, again, because we have, we're trying to understand what is it that an academic institution values that individual researchers or faculty or students value? And what is it that we're trying to create for them to invite them to come spend time in New York City? Again, partly it's location, location, location. Proximity to Wall Street, proximity to a growing climate tech industry, proximity to, if you're worried about climate resilience problems, we have 520 miles of coastline in New York City that you can come work on in a real-time basis. So again, place will be partly a function of giving people access to the opportunities that they may find valuable for professional reasons.
That makes sense. Yeah, being able to peer into the New York Climate Exchange and see some of that technology can really inspire people.
Exactly.
So coming back to that kind of technology and research focus, today you got a small sliver of some of the exciting research that we're being able to undertake here, and you've got to hear about some of the manufacturing that's then come out of those technologies and how they're being scaled globally. I'd love to hear your perspective, what you've encountered today, what some of your reflections are when it comes to research and technology and how it could scale globally.
Well, so I make the disclaimer when I come to a lot of the university partners that I'm a policy guy, I'm a finance guy.
We're not going to let you off the hook that easy.
I know, but it means I may be excessively easily impressed when people show me cool Tinker toys. And sometimes some of the campuses I've had the opportunity to kind of go visit the marine science department and to see the tech that they're doing. And when we were at the climate summit, we had the opportunity to get on one of the major research vessels that is now supporting oceanographic research around the world. And it was one of those things where I thought, man, if I had been on this boat when I was a teenager, I would not be a policy or finance guy. I would be doing something, swimming in the ocean. I had a similar reaction yesterday when, I was visiting the laboratory that has been created on campus to inspire students to I don't want to say play, but to build
the invention
stuff.
studio,
the invention studio, the maker studio. What an extraordinary resource you have given to this community to make it available to students, at all hours of the day or night, that you're putting students in the lead in terms of managing this, in terms of training others and inviting them in and trying to excite them about what it is that they might have the opportunity to build or do there. So when you have 3D printing machines, you have a machine shop, you have a wood shop, if you're trying to clear your head after focusing on your midterm exams, and now you can go, again, use your hands, build stuff, play around with, I wonder if I could do something that actually might link back to what I'm learning in the classroom, or my friends and I are talking about some idea that we may, again, actually want to try and build something. What a resource to have access to that. So to me, that's the kind of thing that universities don't do enough of. I understand there's a lot of these maker studios, in different parts of the world, but I think the way that Georgia Tech has particularly structured it to really give students ownership of this is not just an educational, experience that they can enjoy, but it's a leadership opportunity. And frankly, if you're talking about who are the people who are going to go build the solutions we need in the future, you want to get people into that leadership mentality. And I think that's what you're fostering here.
Fantastic. Yep. And I know in some of the proposal and ideas, there was ideas to be able to put a makerspace on the island to be able to exchange that kind of best practice as well. I also want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, because that's become very much a theme across many of the things we do here at Georgia Tech. And I know we also had visions of being able to create this tech incubator or climate incubator on the island. Could you talk a little bit about how you see startups or research progressing to that point where it could be commercialized and what opportunities there could be on the island?
So invite me back in a few months and I'll have a longer answer, but kind of here's my sense right now. there are a few things that we're going to be able to leverage by virtue of our location. One is the fact that the city of New York is about to release a new green economy action plan. And they are positioning the exchange as a critical element of that future green economy. And so, the role that we play in terms of knowledge, in terms of workforce development, and in the form of tech incubation, positions us again to really shape that in a really influential way. And I'm excited about that. What we would actually choose to focus on is something that I think we actually want partners to come sit with us and think through, this question, because we want to, again, take account of the fact that are we focused on solutions that are immediately relevant locally? Are we focused on things that we actually want to try and test out on the island itself? No. Are we focused on more of a global challenge? And again, you are trying to build stuff that, again, will be deployed somewhere else and may address some need? Or are you focused on fintech? And again, that may be an area where New York has a particular advantage, proximity to Wall Street, a lot of entrepreneurs in the tech industry. You have Cornell Tech up the river, again, a growing hub of engagement on these. It's not Silicon Valley in New York, it's Silicon Alley in New York. That was, kind of how the city was positioning itself many years ago. And now, again, they're saying, well, let's transition and focus more on climate-related technologies. And there have been several news stories in the last few months alone really highlighting the fact that there is a lot of entrepreneurship going on in and around the city. Again, the action plan is assuming that Governor's Island will be a key hub, along with two other areas in Brooklyn that are easily, reachable by ferry. Mm-hmm. And so we may have this little ecosystem forming, right there. And again, I think we're getting in very early into this conversation, and we have a huge opportunity to shape that. So it's pretty exciting.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up for the audience, because I know they've been sitting here patiently for about the last 50 minutes as we chat away. And one thing I'd really like to hear your perspective on is students, right? So Georgia Tech students, right? In the future, when this multi-university campus is built, right? How does that experience unfold for a undergraduate student at Georgia Tech?
So, the vision has been that we're going to, create an opportunity that I think the original narrative was, a lot of students today in many universities, not all, but, many universities, students do seek out kind of a semester abroad, study abroad opportunity where they want to go live somewhere else, try something else out for a period of time. And the exchange and the educational program on island was, has been positioned as a climate study abroad equivalent. Yeah. Come live on our island, come study climate science, technology, finance, policy, health. Yeah. Having a real immersive experience, living in a building. Again, you talked about the living building that Candida is. We're going to have kind of our equivalent. And so really walking the talk in terms of how you live and what that might mean in terms of, are you understanding if you're making any sacrifices in terms of quality of life, or is it just you're not? I think that we will create those opportunities and will embrace, students coming from Georgia Tech and our other partner institutions. Again, it can be study abroad. I mentioned that we're going to have this internship program launching this summer. We will expand that in the coming years. It can come work on climate issues that our community partners are putting on the table, saying we need help on these. And so I'm hopeful that Georgia Tech students will capitalize on that. But again, eventually I know with great certainty that a lot of people are going to want to come to, be a part of exchange programming, because we will have these linkages to Wall Street as well, and this burgeoning climate tech sector, that we will be able to, we can be the home base for them. We can provide, if they're working in those institutions 4 days a week, then we can provide some continuity or other types of, educational experience for them on that 5th day. We'll work that out. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to host today, but when we get the campus up and operational in a few years, that's when we'll be having the serious conversations with the Georgia Tech community about what is it that you would like to see, what are the things that you would really hope to be able to experience if you come and participate in our educational program.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any burning questions from the audience? I think we may have a microphone. We do, look at that.
Hi, I'm Rohan. Thank you for coming. It was great. You mentioned your location, testing things on the island itself, playing with the living building regulations. Do you see Governor's Island becoming a regulatory playbox with the backing from New York to really test new things, new policies, new financial devices, new cars, etc.?
Probably not the cars. Maybe you can come ride an electric golf cart. No, I mean, there aren't a lot of vehicles on the island. I think if you're thinking about, the regulations that are actually where we are already working with the city, the changes were needed. The mass timber construction, already represents a breakthrough in terms of getting the city to say yes to that. There have been conversations about how tall the building could be, and we've had to make some adjustments accordingly. So again, what is the policies that we're trying to change? The codes that are foundational to every bit of construction going forward for the coming decades. So that could be massive if we help them make some changes. Similarly, in terms of the other infrastructure, in terms of sanitation, in terms of other things that are fundamental to the infrastructure of any place, much less being on an island, then we're already talking to them because, again, we're going to be an important part of how Governor's Island develops. We are not the only part, but we can, again, shape that if we get the city to agree to move in a particular direction, then all of the other construction that occurs on the island or the redevelopment that occurs on the island will benefit or follow suit. So we do have the opportunity to really influence that in a meaningful way.
Thank you. Great. And I think I saw a hand up over here. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Hammer. Thank you for coming. This is great. Not to echo Rohan, but to echo Rohan. Given the nature and intersectionality of a lot of climate work, has there been that sort of flexibility and ability for leadership and growth within the topics that you see playing out? And I understand that this is still a young and early vision for the space, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts.
So again, week 10 on the job, but working on climate issues for the better part of 30 years. So, and I've been very fortunate to work on things at the local level, work on things at the global level, work with the private sector, work with community organizations. And so I'm trying to be very respectful of these very different ideas that are within the realm of possibility. I often walk around and people ask me, so what are you going to do? I show them a blank notebook and it's like, well, this is our work program right now. We have the opportunity to shape that. And how cool is that? I mean, for me, it's an extraordinary opportunity to feel like we can put Governor's Island, we can put the exchange on the map if we are selective and strategic in terms of some of the issues that we tackle first. We want to be cognizant of the fact that there is a lot going on. I mean, look, for us to say that there is no progress is completely crazy. There's a lot of good things that are happening. They're not moving fast enough, and they're not moving at the scale that we need. And so part of what is important to me as we think through the activities or the programming that we're going to do is to really focus on that speed and scale. because we want to do transformative stuff. And we want to, sometimes the transformative stuff may actually be really slow because it's such a hard problem to solve. But if you can't have the best academic minds and some of the leading corporations of the world and people who represent community perspectives and labor unions and people who are bringing cultural perspectives to that conversation, if we can't leverage that in the name of solving the hardest problems, then I don't think we're delivering on what the city had in mind when it said, we want someone to come create a center for climate solutions. So I'm all about ambition. I'm very cognizant of the political realities that we need some quick wins to prove the operating model. The operating model of, again, being able to have Georgia Tech and University of Washington and Oxford and New York City and upper, New York State schools get involved. At the same time, we're trying to involve community organizations who have a lot on their plate. We have to figure out how to make that model work. So again, a lot of what we're doing is not just the big ideas in terms of policies or challenges that we're trying to overcome. We're trying to prove that there's a new way to do things that involves these different partners, that embraces the different perspectives they bring to that conversation. And if we can prove that model works, that's going to be quite extraordinary by itself.
I love it. Yep. So this concept of the simple hypothesis that collaboration works, right? I know I have to be cognizant of time, so I just want to hear your final thoughts there on how does this all come together with collaboration and partners.
Well, it may be a little bumpy. Again, I've worked on challenging issues over the course of my career, but I've also seen how you can make progress when you have people who are committed. They may be coming from a different place. They may have a very different perspective on what it means to succeed, but everybody is committed to moving away from where we are now to a better situation. Sometimes that means accommodation. Sometimes that means I'm going to have to rethink how I'm even approaching this. And that can be painful along the way for some of the participants. But again, we want to create an exchange that celebrates that exchange of ideas, that celebrates, again, a process that actively tries to engage different voices, different perspectives in the challenges, addressing those challenges or capitalizing on the opportunities. And although I keep talking about the New York, New York-based community organizations who are there, I really want to close by just emphasizing that we are going to be working with a lot of strategic partners outside of New York City. Why? Because we have good ideas that we'll be able to share with them, and we're going to be able to import great ideas from them back to New York. And that is that global exchange that I think is going to be as important to anything that we do.
Excellent. Well said. Well, thank you for making the trip down here, and we're glad to have you. So
thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you to Georgia Tech.